Would be
Good
good.
catch.
Okay, thank you, everybody. Welcome to the Santa Margarita Groundwater Agency Board Meeting of October 23rd. Can I get a roll call, please?
Yes, you can. Director Cassidy,
Here.
Director Cheap,
Here.
Director Engford,
Here.
Director Largay,
Yes.
Director Lang,
Here.
Director Perry,
Here.
Director Leishman,
Here.
and Director Wynn from the city of Scotts Valley.
Here.
We have a couple folks who are joining remotely. I see Director Koenig. Give me just a moment. I'm gonna promote you to a panelist. And Director Pollock is also joining us remotely, so let's give Supervisor Koenig just a moment to join here. Perfect. Okay,
There we go.
all right.
Okay, thank you,
Hi.
everyone.
Thank you.
All right. And I'm just gonna jump in here and say I'd like to welcome the new director, Greg Wimp, the new city council member at City of Scotts Valley. And he got the honor to represent the city here at our humble board. And also like to say, nice to see Frank sitting there.
I can now speak.
Yes, yes. The
You got
mute
the
button
adult-
has been turned
We're
off.
at the adult table. No more gag orders.
Anyway, welcome.
Thank you.
Welcome to both. Any additions or deletions to the agenda? Staff or the board? No, hearing none. Oral communications on matters not on the agenda. Do we have we have two people in the audience live, and do we have people live online?
We do have a few folks joining us online remotely. I'm not seeing any hands go up online.
Okay. Okay, nothing here. Then we will go ahead to the consent agenda. There's nothing to be pulled. Do I hear a motion from anybody? Moved. Second. All those, Cassidy, Director Cassidy was the motion, Director Engford was the second. And all those, oh no, we have a roll call vote because we have people virtual.
Okay, here we go. Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Chief.
I think I have to abstain because I was not at the last meeting to approve the minutes. I think
We'll give you that.
abstain.
You do, although just a point of order, because this has come up multiple times, as long as you have read the minutes, it's okay for you to vote on them even if you weren't at the prior meeting.
Then I withdraw my abstain and say aye.
I never knew that.
Director Engford,
Aye.
Supervisor Koenig,
Aye.
Director Largan. Aye. Director Lang,
Aye.
Director Perry,
Aye.
Director Pollock,
Aye.
Director Leishman,
Aye.
and Director Wynn.
So I just want to clarify, was this the 8/28?
If you read it, you can do it.
Okay, well, I just want to clarify, it is the 8/28.
That is correct.
Okay, then, yes, aye.
Okay, great. Motion passes. Unanimous. Okay, presentations. We have, I think Heidi is gonna go first.
We have two presentations tonight, so we can go in either order, but per the agenda. I think
Oh, the
Rob is up
sustainability
first
part.
With the sustainability
Sorry, Rob.
update, so.
Yeah.
Let me share my screen here for the folks joining.
How about I
online.
kiss Rob?
So brief hydrology update, brief groundwater level update. So we have begun collecting our end of water year data so that we can begin preparing the annual report. So I just want to share some of the highlights of the now closed water year 2025.
Dramatic pause, Rob, I'm sorry, it's a little slow on the swap.
And some of this will have some relevance to the periodic evaluation presentation and discussion that we'll have later on the agenda. So we closed up the year, it was rather dry. So when we look at the precipitation in Boulder Creek and in Scotts Valley, we can see we were about 60 to 64% of average for typical years, the last 30 years. So we had 32 inches at Boulder Creek, 24 inches at Scotts Valley, and disappointing when it comes to rainfall. That translates to flow in the San Lorenzo River, which was dramatic pause. 57,868 acre feet compared to about 99,000 as a typical 30-year average. So again, 58% of average flow. So no big surprises. That translates to precipitation. Flow on the San Lorenzo River, a little disappointing for the year. And we have been conducting the monthly dry season monitoring in the basin. For you, those of you who are new, part of the groundwater sustainability plan, we are looking at the groundwater basin's contribution to stream flow. So we don't have a snowpack in this basin. So as things stop raining around the April and May timeframe, all of the creeks are fed by release from the groundwater system. So that's one of the things that we do with our groundwater sustainability plan. I like to show some of the monthly. In the spring, we showed the beginning of year. Here are our last readings from September, and we are looking at 5 years worth of data. So we have some pretty good comparisons, sort of no surprises. We had these really dry 2021, 22, super wet 2023, a little bit, still pretty good 2024, and again, a dry 2025. So all of the stations that we're monitoring in the basin are tracking in a similar way. So no surprises. I think the important part here is as we start the periodic evaluation, this gives us information to decide how many of these locations will we continue to monitor going forward? Are some of these really representative, and is there a need to continue doing the level of monitoring that we're doing? It's good to see consistent data. If we saw inconsistent data, that would be justification for not looking at reducing some of that monitoring. Back, Tim. Oops, sorry, Rob. So let's take a look at water levels and how they perform during the year in the ground. We look at two different sets of aquifers. So on the left-hand side, we have the Santa Margarita sandstone. That's our shallow aquifer system. And on the right-hand side, we have the Monterey Formation, which isn't really a good aquifer. It doesn't yield high quantities of water, but it's ubiquitous around the basin. And a lot of our domestic well owners rely on it because it's relatively shallow. So it's still important, but it's not considered a really good aquifer because of the yield of water. Below that, then we have the Lompico and the Butano. And primarily the Lompico and the Butano are only at depths that we use them for municipal supply in the Scotts Valley area. So as we move up into Boulder Creek area, it's so deep that it's really not economically feasible to drill a well that deep to get that for supply. So just again, sort of background for some of the folks that are kind of new to this. So we're going to talk about the shallow zones first, and then we'll look at some of these deeper wells. So in the shallow Santa Margarita, we've been tracking this since the SMGWA effective date 2015. What we do is these are typically monthly manual readings. In some cases, they're semi-annual. The red dots represent the spring. That's when we really like to pay attention to the health of the basin. We just had all the water we're going to get pretty much for the year. How are conditions in the basin as we start that? So we like to track those through time, and then we're looking into the fall. Each one of these hydrographs is one of our representative monitoring points. So you can see that we have these two lines. One is red, the minimum threshold. That's where thou shalt not go. If you go below there, now we have undesirable results in the basin. Measurable objectives, that's what we aspire to. But again, under SMGWA, as a reminder, it's the minimum threshold that we're trying to avoid. We are not judged if we don't meet the measurable objectives. Okay, so that's our goal, but we can see through time, these track really well with the hydrology that we've been talking about. When we look at the latest fall measurements, there are no big surprises, with one exception being Olympia 3, which is a production well. And obviously it was being used for purposes there. And we have another well, Olympia 1, that we installed monitoring equipment on. It's a former production well. We, during the periodic evaluation, will be looking at replacing these wells, right? So we would actually use that as a better location for monitoring potentially. This is just a really good example of the hazards of using a production well for your groundwater elevation monitoring network. And in the deep zones, again, we continue to see in the deep Butano in some monitoring wells that there's no production up there. So all we see are water levels have just been either stable or in some cases increasing. In the Pasatiempo area in the Lompico Formation, we had some drawdowns here during the year, but they were less than the drawdowns that we saw the prior year. So we're not seeing anything of any significant concern as a result of even these dry conditions. Pretty good overall performance in the basin. But
That's your last one?
Yeah.
huh?
so we're gonna come back and discuss some more details. We talk about the periodic evaluation later.
Okay, thank you very much, Rob. Any questions? No? Okay, anything from the public?
Not seeing any hands go up online?
Okay,
So anxious.
then now I'm gonna call on Heidi. Come up here from the city of Santa Cruz
Thank you.
and tell us about the water system intertie project.
I'm gonna tell you a little bit about the project. It's a 3-person show. We have myself, Heidi Luckenbach, Water Director in Santa Cruz. My colleague who is online, Taylor Kehoy, he's the,
Be just joining us, Heidi. Let me, I just promoted him, so hopefully. Yep.
Taylor is our senior engineer and he's the project manager for the project. And then I think David McNair is gonna round it out for us. And you're gonna run it? Tim?
I am, I'm gonna share my screen here. I just wanted to make sure that Taylor was with us before I lose my view here. Presentation mode.
I just have 2 slides, so we can just skip to the second one, please, Tim. The next one. Actually, I apologize. Can we go back because
Sure.
I am kicking it off. I guess I should recognize this is a partnership between Scotts Valley Water District, the city of Santa Cruz. Kenny Jenks did the design. Dudek did the environmental work. We have HDR on board doing some construction management. And then we got a grant from the state of California that we are very appreciative for. Next slide, please. I wanted to, this slide kind of looks backward and then a little bit forward, as does my next slide, because the Intertie project, it's called Intertie 1 because it was part of a grant back in the late 1990s. And there was a number of different interties throughout the county and the state was grant funding it. And the state's grant did not meet the needs of the project. And so this intertie between the city of Santa Cruz and the Scotts Valley Water District was let go from that project. I think if I remember correctly, it was about 1997 because I was just starting with the city at the time. We kept it on the books the whole time and this grant opportunity came up and we want to be connected for emergency purposes, reliability. And so a number of years ago that Taylor will speak to, we dusted off the plans, made some minor adjustments and are in construction. It also has potential as per the GSP, the Groundwater Sustainability Plan, to be a Group 2 Tier 2 project, which means it could be utilized for basin sustainability. Right now, again, we're working with Scotts Valley Water District to work on agreements for as soon as it's in place, how we can send water back and forth. And then we're gonna be doing some groundwater modeling and some ongoing testing and conversations about how we can use it in the future. I just wanted to just for some context, would you go to the next slide, please, Tim? I know this is a super busy slide. I'm from the city of Santa Cruz and the city has been pursuing water supply augmentation for decades. We have been doing a number of different studies in parallel and that whole top band is a body of work that we've been doing with Soquel Creek Water District largely because we're partners with them in the Mid-County Groundwater Basin. We're doing a very similar body of work up in this basin at a slower path because that basin's in critical overdraft. So in this basin, we have that luxury of time. We're doing very similar work. And then the city is also continuing to look at desalination, direct potable reuse, and then indirect potable reuse, and some indirect potable reuse as well. And I say that because I know we can focus in on projects, and we will focus in on this project. This is a piece of the puzzle for the city of Santa Cruz, a piece of the puzzle for the district, and then has opportunities for other agencies, but we're a ways away from really understanding what that could look like. Next slide. This is my final slide. This is just laying out the different modeling scenarios we're doing in both basins. Just to focus on the column on the right. This is we're building on the work that we understand in the Mid-County Basin in SoCal. In the next 6 months, so by May of 2026, we will complete a body of groundwater modeling that we're doing in partnership with Scotts Valley to see if we can expand the function of the intertie up to as much as 1.5 million gallons per day in one or either direction. At phase 2 there, up to 1 MGD, that's when we would have to likely put in an ASR well in the Scotts Valley service area. That also was talked about during the development of this GSP. And we're a ways away from really understanding the who, what, where, why, when, and how that set of infrastructure pieces, the intertie and the pump station and the relationship in terms of operating both systems would actually come together. So the next step is our groundwater modeling, and we could be coming back to this board in 6 or 8 months with some further thinking about opportunities for this basin, but again, we're a ways away. And I bring it up because we are taking to our city council next week a contract to do that modeling work. So just to put it out there that we're thinking onward on this project. I think the next couple slides are Taylor. Great. Unless there's any questions?
I have a question. Is the tide turning, not to be funny, in desalinization statewide? I know that Carmel Valley Water got approval from Coastal Commission for the marina plant. I think that's tied up in litigation today. I actually saw documents that you generated back in 2016 when there was a tri-county proposal down Lost Landing that didn't go through. I mean, just kind of what is your opinion for desal going forward?
In terms of the tide, the regulatory tide?
Yeah, regulatory tide, I mean, part of it is, sort of political climate locally. I think there was environmental concerns. If you were a betting person, would you say in the next 10 years, desal is, and I'm not with the press, I'm not trying to report it.
Right.
I'll get you on record.
And I don't know, it's been
Yeah.
a while since we've really researched that climate. I think I would also say that depending upon two other things, depending upon weather, because weather is changing, I think the whole state climate may have to change. The regional collaboration, sharing surface water, groundwater is great as long as you have it. I also know that all of our agencies, the district, San Lorenzo Valley, the city, and SoCal Creek, our demand is so low because of conservation that the gap is also smaller. So it's hard to say. We're hopeful that we can solve it with conjunctive use type projects, but we also can't predict the weather.
And then the strategy for reuse of tertiary treated water from sewage plant, which is SoCal Pure and all that stuff, that's primarily to recharge that water basin to stave off seawater intrusion, as I understand, but it's also augmenting as ground storage as well.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see that more likely candidate versus desal, even though the technologies are identical?
What the city is looking at is partnering with them for water transfers. So I think there's good opportunity there. We are also looking at using kind of what's left, if you will, from the city's wastewater treatment plant as direct potable reuse. Because it's more efficient, there's not as much losses. So we are gonna look at that. Where does that stand against desalination? Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anyone else? Doug, did you raise your? No. Okay, anybody online like to ask a question before Taylor starts? We have Heidi's undivided attention.
I'm not seeing any hands go up online.
Okay, thank you, Heidi. Okay, Taylor?
Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
We can.
Oh, great. So my name is Taylor Kehoy. I'm a senior engineer with the water department, and the project manager for our Scotts Valley Intertie project. Oh, we lost the presentation.
I was just pulling it down just so they can, while you're introducing yourself, they can see you, Taylor. I'll pull
Okay.
it back. Second.
All right. So today I'm just going to give kind of a brief project overview, talk about some accomplishments for this project, give an update on the construction status, and then highlight some challenges that we've had, and then upcoming work as well to get the project completed. So overall, the project consists of a 2-mile pipeline that originates at the city's Kite Hill water tanks. It then goes through Firehouse Lane to Sims Road, and then follows La Madrona to a new pump station that'll be built at 6000 La Madrona Drive on a parcel owned by the Scotts Valley Fire District. So the major scope elements for the project, we're hoping to optimize the use of surface and groundwater supplies, provide emergency transfers between our agencies. It allows for passive recharge of the Santa Margarita groundwater basin. And then, like I mentioned, it's 8,000 linear feet of 12-inch pipeline, a new pump station, and then addition of fire protection improvements in that area for fire hydrants. They're kind of scattered about the entire pipeline length, including Firehouse Lane. So that'll be a big improvement to the neighboring communities that's been impacted by a lot of the construction activities. A big benefit there. Next slide.
Give me just a second, Taylor, there's a
Okay.
pause there. Okay.
No worries. So Heidi mentioned it earlier, but this project is primarily paid for through a DWR grant. We received $9.5 million that included $6.6 million for the design and construction of the intertie pipeline and pump station, and then an additional $2.8 million for the production well that Scotts Valley Water will speak about in a little bit. We received a City Council approved EIR addendum. There was a water rights environmental impact report that we recently completed that essentially envisions all those changes that Heidi had kind of highlighted before with our water source augmentation efforts. And so, yeah, this project was an addendum to that water rights project. We had 5 contractors qualified during pre-bidding, which shows, especially in our county, it's very difficult right now to get qualified contractors that can bid for reasonable pricing on our project. So that was a big success to get, that many informed contractors that, we're qualified to do the work. We collaborated with the Scotts Valley Fire District and Scotts Valley Water District fairly closely, both for property rights, for fire protection, and also for the long-term operation and use of the new facilities. So that's one big highlight that we're pretty proud of. And then lastly, this project had a lot of public outreach, right-of-way negotiations with partnering agencies, including Caltrans and the County of Santa Cruz Public Works. And then easements, significant amount of easements were obtained as well to bring this project to light, primarily for the construction of the pump station and then along Firehouse Lane. Yeah, just some photos of those facilities in there too. Next slide. So in the spring and summer of this year, if you've driven through this area, there was a ton of construction going on. We were trying our best to try to keep the traffic impacts at a minimum, and also keeping up with temporary paving and things like that while trying to progress the project as quickly as possible. So in spring and summer, kind of showing the process here. So normally you excavate first, and then prepare the pipeline, add valves, cut it to length, things like that. Place that in the trench, and then you provide sand backfill, compact the sand. We had testing completed on all the compactions to confirm that the pipe was ready for backfill, and then placement of slurry along the entire length. So the contractor is completing about 200 feet a day, which for most water agencies, that's a pretty good production rate. It allowed us to complete this pipeline prior to the start of the Brooknell School, which was a big milestone that we were trying to reach. Is getting all this work completed before school is in session, and we were successful at that. So yeah, I would highlight the trenching operations. Next slide. And then come fall, kind of in September, October timeline, we were restoring La Madrona Road. You can see the final completed roadway and striping on the right side. And then, a lot of the paving work that happened on the left. Next slide. So currently, this fall, we're completing Firehouse Lane as well. The trenching is currently complete. The next thing is the roadway restoration. Firehouse Lane is a very narrow driveway, essentially for a handful of residents, and so we're looking to restore that here soon. We've also put a lot of work into winterizing the site. So in the unpaved areas, we have erosion control BMPs kind of throughout. And then within the next couple of weeks, we're installing more of the permanent features, which will be water bars along the Firehouse Lane, and then also hydroseeding to happen using native seeds and a mix of emulsifiers and things like that. So next slide. I just wanted to highlight some construction challenges that we've had so far. You can kind of see in the photo on the left just how tight the space is. And not having a lot of space means that, a contractor can't use very much space for staging things like pipes or spoils from trenching operations. So, typically we try to keep impacts to traffic under 10 minutes, which is challenging at times, especially when you're trying to complete things and then move plates back in place for driveways and neighbors and things. But I would say that that's one really challenging aspect of the project was space for a pipeline this large. And then also, rock, unstable soils and thin pavement. So you can kind of see the pavement kind of falling apart and some of the soils unraveling. We also had to excavate some rock in sections as well that slowed down some of the production. But yeah, it looks great now, and you would never know just the damage that that ensued during the operations of that. And then next slide. So for upcoming work, the plan is to complete all the Firehouse Lane improvements, pump station construction. So the contractors mobilized their staging area for that site. And that'll kind of happen from now through February 2026. We're on track right now for our equipment deliveries, which is another big milestone that we're looking to complete this winter, is getting everything on site and ready to be put in place and tested and commissioned. We also have system tie-ins scheduled for next February, and then completing the full testing and commissioning and training for staff in March of 2026. That coincides right at the end of our grant deadline too. So we're kind of right on time right now. Kind of working through some construction risks and trying to mitigate those the best way possible. But yeah, our goal is to complete it by early next year. And that concludes all my slides. I can pass it on to Dave, I think.
Thank you, Taylor. What you have before you is the entire work plan, project description for the grant. What Taylor just talked about is most of it. It's broken up into two components. What Taylor just covered was component 1. In bold is component 2, which is the production well, which is what project that the district is responsible for. It's the Graceway well. It's about 4 or 5 blocks in that direction. The district actually out of the 6 point, what was the total of that? 6 points, sorry, $9.5 million, 2.8 came back to do the well. So for the well site, the district in February 2023 purchased that lot on Scotts Valley Drive, $52.99 for $845,000. $240,000 was provided through the grant to help offset those costs. We drilled the exploratory borehole in 2023, which informed the design of the well. We got the CEQA completed in 2024. We were able to award the project in July of 24. Building was demolished and well was constructed, and by May of 2025. The well was originally going to be at 1,100 feet deep, but after the pilot was done, we realized we didn't need to go more than 1,000 feet deep. Pump testing went well. This well is going to be our best, highest producing well by far. We set the rate at 500 gallons per minute, but it could probably do a lot more than that. We were running it at close to 800 gallons per minute comfortably. But there is other wells in the area that we currently maintain. So it was determined that the best, probably the best range would be about 500 gallons a minute. So that's what it's set up for. In September, just this past month, the pedestal, if you go on to the next slide, that is the last slide, thank you. In September, the pedestal was formed up, which is that sad little picture that we have there, with the 4 cones around it and a black plastic bag over the well. That's what it looks like today. I just went up.
Finest plastic bags money can buy.
I just went out and took that picture today. So that's what it looks like currently. The site is all prepped. Anderson Pacific is getting ready to do a whole lot of work out there. They're going to be connecting the well site to the raw water main, storm drain, motor control building's going to be built, site paving, drainage improvements, fencing. We're expecting to have this well up and running and completed by the end of February. Big thing is waiting on PG&E, which is when you're in the construction business, that seems like that's always the thing you're always waiting on is PG&E. We still don't have a date yet as to when they're currently designing our power, but we haven't got any kind of a schedule from them yet. That's about it for an update on the well site.
Okay, any questions for Taylor or for Dave? And I'd like to welcome Monica Martinez, board member who joined us. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Any questions from the board for Dave or Taylor? Okay, anything from anyone in the audience or anyone on the virtual audience?
I'll just say, I think this project is really exciting and fantastic. I had to chuckle a little bit when Commissioner Cheap asked, what do you think is more politically palatable, desalination or direct potable? Neither. This is really the low-hanging fruit, and it's really great just to have this kind of capacity within our county. I mean, I think that the intertie with Soquel Creek has been one of the great unsung successes in water policy and really in any sustainability policy in our county. And this is really building on that. And I just want to applaud the effort.
Thank you. I knew that's true. I've been on the board in Scotts Valley since 2007. And we've been talking about something like this and we were always groaning at like having, is it feasible, but it got done. And we got very fortunate with having the grant money and a great partner like the city, Ed Cruz. So, thank you, everybody. And that takes us to our general part of the agenda, which starts with our board vacancy. We once again have another board vacancy of the private well owner representatives, and that would be our alternate. So I'll give it to Tim to.
Right, so I can give a little more information. So, well owner representative, Director Hutchison, resigned in September. And so that, under the bylaws, the acting alternate director, if they are willing to accept that position, shifts into the director seat. And so Director Cheap, the then alternate, was willing, and so is now officially on board. Actually, part of the action tonight is to officially approve his appointment as the well owner representative director. But that of course leaves us with a vacancy. And so we did review the bylaws, just given that we did a solicitation earlier in the year to see if the board had the option to appoint the other applicant from the prior round, because we only had 2 applicants last time. But the bylaws are clear, that's not an option. It's set up for the well owner's self-selection process. And so because of that, what we're asking for tonight is that the board appoint an ad hoc committee, and we'll go through the solicitation process. The bylaws are fairly prescriptive in terms of what that looks like. And so it is to be a 3-member board committee. One of the members is to be a representative of the member agencies. And then the other 2 seats, there's a preference given to the current well owner directors. So, so I think what we are hoping to leave with tonight is that ad hoc committee formed, and then the committee in conjunction with staff will go through the process of looking at the current application, deciding if they want to reuse the same application, and setting up the timeline. There's some dates set out in there. The well owner applicants have a defined period. I think it's 20 to 40 days to then make their selection, and so we have plenty of time to cut to the chase. When we come back in this board's next meeting in February, hopefully that will have been a successful process, and the well owner alternate nomination will occur then.
Do I have any volunteers from I know that these gentlemen from the private well owner group will be on the board. Do I have anyone who wants to walk the plank? And join them?
Should we
Would you like
appoint,
it?
no, should we nominate and appoint Frank first?
Sure, if you'd like to, yes.
Okay.
Is that a sequence for the agenda?
Is it?
I think they're both part of the same motion.
Okay.
I'll pull up the motion in the packet and share my screen. I think it's a 2-parter here.
Hate for him to get shoehorned into a committee before he's.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a good point.
Then it's not official, right?
I think,
So the recommended motion that you can see there, it does, the first step there is approving well owner director Cheap to assume the director role. And then form an ad hoc committee and appoint 3 members.
do I have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
I'll second.
Okay. All those, roll call vote.
Director Kathy,
Yes.
Cheap,
Yeah.
Engberg,
Aye.
Koenig,
Aye.
Largay,
Yes.
Lang,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Leishman,
Aye.
and Wim.
Aye.
Okay.
Okay, and he voted for himself.
Okay. I wasn't in the minutes, so.
Oh.
Oh, I'm sorry.
understand.
Martinez, you're down, I have you down
I
below.
totally get it.
Yes,
Aye.
thank you.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Okay, A, B, does anyone want to be on that committee? Or am I gonna have to do it? I'll do it.
It's like it's you.
Okay,
Thank you.
it is Frank, Eden, and myself, and do I have a motion?
So move.
Second?
Second.
Okay, second that. Wait, Leishman second, and for motion, a roll call vote?
Thank you. Cassidy,
Yes.
Cheap,
Yes.
Engfer,
Aye.
Koenig,
Aye.
Largay,
Yes.
Lang,
Aye.
Perry,
Aye.
Pollock,
Aye.
Leishman,
Aye.
Wim,
Aye.
and Martinez.
Aye.
Okay, good job. So we have an update on the groundwater sustainability plan, periodic evaluation. That would be Ron.
You know, I have to promote him first, Rob, because I lose the view. So.
Okay, so Pete Dennehy is our project manager from M&A. He's online, available to answer questions. I'm gonna tackle the presentation tonight, though. So just to give some background before we start, at our last meeting, we talked about 4 recommended corrective actions that the Department of Water Resources wants us to address as we're going through our periodic evaluation. Tonight, I want to focus on 2 of those and what I think are the implications, and what I think will result in us proposing a plan amendment when we come in February, right? So we've talked about in theory, do we think we're gonna do an amendment or not? We've been looking the last couple of months since we last met, and do believe we have compelling reason to do so. We haven't had an opportunity yet. We've been working on setting up a meeting with the Department of Water Resources to talk about our perspective on these and get theirs. So some of what I'm gonna talk about tonight could change, but I thought it'd be best to go ahead and give you what we believe we would discuss with them. So periodic evaluation overview. State released guidelines in 2023. We talked about these at our last meeting. Essentially, it's the cookbook. I did reorganize this a little bit from what we showed you at our previous meeting. On the left-hand side are what I consider to be the relatively straightforward parts of the periodic evaluation, describing groundwater conditions relative to the sustainable management criteria or SMC, status of projects and management actions, what have you been doing to implement the groundwater sustainability plan, what kind of outreach have you been doing? We do this in every annual report. But when we do a periodic evaluation, we're gonna up the game a little bit. We might look at some of the trends. We look at 1 year at a time during the annual report. Now we'll look at the 5-year trends over that period that we've been preparing those. So a little more substantial, but what we're used to doing. On the right-hand side, I think are the more challenging parts, right? So we have to start looking at new information. So we installed new monitoring wells. We've been monitoring the stream gauges that we were talking about earlier. Well, some of those monitoring wells were right near the stream gauges. We need to understand what their relationships are. So there's a lot of technical information that we need to analyze to bring into the periodic evaluation, and that ties into the review of our monitoring network. And again, we talked about this in the previous portion of the presentation. Sometimes if you have a production well, it might be better to have a dedicated monitoring well if we're looking at water elevations. So we're gonna be assessing the appropriateness of the network that we had at the time that we adopted the plan. And then finally, addressing recommended corrective actions, which again, I'm gonna go into detail, probably painful detail for a few of you on there, but we're gonna talk about that a lot tonight. And then again, it all leads to, do we need to amend the GSP? So, go ahead. So before we start talking about those recommended corrective actions, I know it breaks the rules, don't have a bunch of text on your slides, but I really thought it was worth bringing this in. These are the guidelines from the Department of Water Resources, best management practices for sustainable management criteria. They were published in November of 2017, and I think that they're important to highlight a couple of points. So when you define locally what an undesirable result is, it is based on minimum threshold exceedances. Okay, remember that point. undesirable results we define by threshold exceedances at either a single monitoring site, multiple monitoring sites, a portion of the basin, the management area, or the entire basin. So it's up to the GSA to decide what is that scale at which it looks at its representative monitoring points in the basin. Exceeding a minimum threshold at a single monitoring site is not necessarily an undesirable result, although we defined it as such in our groundwater sustainability plan. But it could signal the need for modifying one or more management actions or implementing a project to benefit an area before the issue becomes widespread throughout the basin. So it's telling you what I like to say, stay at 30,000 feet. Keep looking at the basin. If you have an individual well, and the operators of these wells know that every once in a while you pick something mysterious up in your well and you deal with it. It does not mean the basin is unsustainable. Another definition, minimum thresholds. A minimum threshold is the quantitative value that represents the groundwater conditions that represent the monitoring site that, when exceeded, may result in undesirable results. Okay, so these definitions are important as we talk about the way that we have gone about our plan. So now we can look at what the state commented on when they did approve our plan, but said they wanted to address these things. So recommended corrective action number 2 had to do with our definition of undesirable results for groundwater levels. And so our definition from our groundwater sustainability plan, I just underlined 2 components here. It's in any RMP. So any single well represent with a minimum threshold constitutes an undesirable result in our basin. We did define and underline there, not in drought unit, right? So that's all bets are off. Well, the state already allows for that. They allow you to establish sustainable management criteria contemplating that you'll move into a drought. So they said, you can't put that in your definition. You have to remove that. And we described that to you at our previous meeting. And there were good questions. Well, what happens if we were to remove that? So we have looked at a lot of hydrographs, especially from our modeling. We've looked at climate projections. And whatever you believe, we look at sequences that can be run very dry for a decade. And so a single RMP, if that was our basis and we do not have this drought year caveat, could result in undesirable results. So I think we have to come up with a different approach. I think we've been overly conservative in describing what those undesirable results are. So we do think we're going to remove the caveat, but I think that there's more that we want to look at. Again, I'm trying to preview some of these ideas with you tonight to get your reaction, because I was not here when you developed your plan. I don't know what the basis for some of these decisions was. I can tell you I've worked with a lot of other plans. A single RMP is not a common approach to defining undesirable results for a basin. So, and we'll leave it at that. So move forward, let's take a look at, from our plan, our annual report. Essentially, we have our aquifers, the Santa Margarita, the Lompico Botano, and then we of course have this Monterey Formation, which again, we talked about earlier. Not a great aquifer, but it's very relevant to domestic well owners in the basin. It's very important to them. Low yields, but when you're not using that much water, it's a very important source. So in the Santa Margarita, we only have 4 wells. And we're saying that any one of these 4, if there's an exceedance, we're experiencing, again, undesirable results in the basin. If you remember my earlier presentation, there's a lot of shallow Santa Margarita all around the basin. And there are a lot of wells that are out there. And of course, in the Lompico and the Botano, we have just a handful of wells as well. So again, the approach has been, if any single one of these goes below, we're experiencing undesirable results. You can see from our annual reports, the good news is, I know the colors are a little washed out, but we don't have any red. We don't have any MT exceedances. We think we're looking pretty good there. Again, when we look at future climate, that's when we get a little bit concerned that could get triggered when we may not actually be experiencing undesirable results basin-wide. So here's a map of our monitoring. You don't need to be able to read it all. The point that I want to make from it is, if you look at the yellow dots that are all over there, we have one yellow dot in each of our major aquifer zones. So we have the Quail Hollow, the Olympia, the Pasatiempo area. We're using one monitoring well as the indicator for that entire region. And we know that we have more monitoring wells that we've constructed recently, Santa Margarita, the SMGWA 5, 6. We have other wells around the basin. We should be looking at this a little more broadly and not assuming that one well is indicative of what's actually happening throughout the area, okay, throughout that broader area. So what we're actually proposing to do with the Santa Margarita is add monitoring points, because we're already monitoring them anyway. It's not additional effort. And we would redefine it. Just to give you an example, maybe we would define 10 of these yellow wells that are distributed broadly throughout the basin. And we would define a criteria, something like, if we see 3 of these monitoring wells drop below their minimum thresholds for 2 consecutive years, the way that we have it now we're experiencing undesirable results. Because again, we know that with San Lorenzo Valley in particular, you are utilizing your well fields sort of strategically, right, to match up to conditions. So there may be a period at which it makes complete sense to be relying heavily on the Olympia well field versus the Quail Hollow well field. So that adds operational flexibility when you do something like that. So that's the first concept that I want to bring to you. And our plan is to, over the next few months until we meet in February, do a detailed analysis and come back to you with specific proposal. But again, we want to daylight to you what the approach would be. If you go back, Tim, one. Another concept, and we've had a question about monitoring in Lompico versus the Butano. I find Lompico and Butano to be kind of interesting. They are distinct depositional environments, but between the 2 units, there is no distinct layer, right? There's no confining layer. And what Scotts Valley Water District has discovered is they're drilling wells in both aquifers, and they look at levels in Lompico versus Butano. There's not a lot of difference. So from an aquifer perspective, behaviorally, they may not be that different. And so we may want to consider actually combining those 2 into a single aquifer unit, right? Just because they're described as a geologic formation doesn't necessarily mean that they are distinct aquifers. When Sigma passed, San Joaquin Valley was ground zero. And when Sigma said, we want you to describe your aquifers and come up with sustainable management criteria for your different aquifers, they were largely referring to the San Joaquin Valley and the fact that this Corcoran clay exists everywhere. And in the upper 500 feet, it's an all unconfined, and below it, it's confined. And when they're pumping from those units, they're collapsing clays and they're getting subsidence. So the whole notion of having these different criteria for all of your aquifers, it was really kind of leaning there. And so we want to consider, and again, come back to you and potentially consider combining those 2 as a single unit. So the next major area is degraded water quality. So again, our definition, and I highlighted the important part, it says, water quality conditions, if it's caused by our actions, then we could consider it undesirable. But if we didn't cause it, it's not undesirable. And sorry, but Sigma doesn't say that. If there's a problem in the basin, there's a problem in the basin. It doesn't really matter, right, if you caused it or not. So we have to eliminate that portion of the criteria. And so we're going to be looking at doing that. Again, to me, that's pretty straightforward. Again, I think we should not rely on a single representative monitoring point as an indicator about basin sustainability. We should look at this more holistically. Go ahead, Tim. So if we look at what we've defined in our annual report, these are the 2 tables that we use. We selected total dissolved solids, fluoride, iron, manganese, arsenic, nitrate, MTBE, chlorobenzene, TCE, PCE, and a daughter product of those. I don't know what the rationale was. We can see that we have a lot of non-detects for these constituents. To me, that says they are not a contaminant of concern in the basin. Of course, if you have a dry cleaner, and we have several of them right around Mount Herman Road there, yes. And we need to work closely with the regulators to make sure all that cleanup's occurring. But it doesn't necessarily mean that this entire basin should be defining these contaminants as our issue. Iron and manganese are secondary standards. They are not public health-based standards. They're basically aesthetics. I don't know why we would really want to have that identified as a constituent of concern. It happens. High iron and manganese happens everywhere, and water agencies deal with it, and the public deals with it. And here is, I think, resolves the biggest issue that exists, and why I highlighted the DWR definitions earlier, is we have defined the, in this case, a secondary maximum contaminant level for these constituents, knowing that they already exceed it. So every year, we report iron and manganese in the red, that they exceed the minimum threshold. While at the same time, we use as a measurable objective their average concentrations. So in the next table, we report that iron and manganese are meeting the measurable objectives. That's fundamentally at odds. You cannot exceed a minimum threshold and meet a measurable objective. So I think we should, and again, I'm proposing this to the state. My previous basin had plenty of iron and manganese and did not have a criteria, a sustainable management criteria for that. So what I would propose to the state is that we focus on total dissolved solids. Salinization of a basin is a thing. You pump groundwater, you use it at the surface, it goes down, it picks up some salts. It can. Total dissolved solids, especially in closed basin through time, make it unusable. Very important. Chloride, it's just hand in hand with total dissolved solids. There will not be an instance in which chloride will exceed 250 milligrams per liter in our basin before total dissolved solids hits 1,000. That might happen where you have seawater intrusion. It will not happen in this basin. So I would propose that chloride is not a necessary constituent either. Nitrate is important. We know that we have that as a source all around the basin. Arsenic, potentially important. We know that we have it in some of our formations. We know that as hydrogeochemistry in the subsurface changes, it could get released. It's known to happen, so I think we should pay attention to it. And I think the remainder that we should remove from sustainable management criteria, get focused on a very small number that we're monitoring with this program. I'm not suggesting we get rid of consideration of all contamination. I'm suggesting we take another approach. So we take the criteria that we're going to monitor in our production wells, and the next slide, we add a management action to our plan. And that is to conduct an annual review. The state has really developed some really nice tools for us. And unfortunately, a lot of them came in after the groundwater sustainability plans were well under development. They do things like have an update every year for risk map. They look at constituents that show up of concern, like arsenic is one, and they look at where they are in comparison to domestic wells. And so they would identify areas that are high risk. So we should be monitoring something like that every year. The most powerful is GeoTracker. This has been around for 25 years. And that is every site that is being investigated, remediated, closed, all the history of all contamination. And here's Scotts Valley and these 5 or 6 green dots that are still solid green. That means those are active remediation around dry cleaners. So it's important. But again, that's not showing up in these wells, right? So what are we doing? We should be paying attention to what's happening here. And we should be working closely with environmental cleanup program staff, right? They're the ones that ultimately, unless it's a big Superfund site, that's staying at the county level. And I think that there's an opportunity here to meet with them in an intentional way, to share information that we're seeing from our wells and where we're putting wells, what's important to us, and get information from them on how what sites have been closing, what sites have been popping up, what kind of issues are there. That way we can start paying attention in real time to those kinds of things, rather than having this static table that has 10 different constituents in it that aren't really telling us a whole lot. So again, we think it's important to pay attention to contamination, but you can't just set that criteria. Every time a new contaminant popped up, your list is going to get longer and longer and longer, and it's going to be 150 columns before you know it, right? So that's the approach that I'm suggesting that we investigate. And again, as I said earlier, it would be more than a single, representative monitoring point that would constitute an undesirable result. So we look at redefining that. And at that point, that's significant of a change. That would trigger a GSP amendment, so. So again, just kind of reminder of the schedule. So we're gonna go back, Pete, and the team from M&A and myself will work over the next few months that we have to really dive into what I'm proposing to you and come back to you with some of those, details. We'll give you an update on the periodic evaluation progress. will make that final determination on the need for a GSP amendment. There's a process when you're preparing a plan or an amendment, you have public notifications and such, so that would happen leading up to the board meeting, that we intend to adopt a resolution to update our groundwater sustainability plan. If you remember those kinds of things that we had to do back in the original plan. Then we'll come back to you with a draft of that periodic evaluation and a draft of the groundwater sustainability plan amendment itself. We're gonna try to keep, not touch it too much, but touch the areas of that plan that are necessary. We really don't want to rewrite that whole plan. So we're gonna preserve as much as possible. So that'll be our May board meeting. Then, because of, again, GSP requirements, we're required to notify any city or county that is potentially affected by the plan. They have to be given a 90-day notice. So by July 24 is when we would have to provide notice to them. We don't have to have a meeting, but that gives us the 90-day window to come back. August, we would have board public comment on both the drafts, and hopefully come back in October with these finals. So it's an aggressive schedule. We were trying to stick with our traditional board meeting calendar. We reserve the right to call a special meeting if there's unresolved issues. But ultimately, the due date is January 3rd, 2027, and that cannot change. So we're gonna stick to that.
Okay,
Any reactions, questions, discussion?
well done. No, anything?
Can I ask
Okay, Dave.
Well, we were talking water quality.
Yes.
It's, do you recall, you were there from the beginning, how you ended up with the water quality parameters that we have?
I think we were looking at the parameters that we have, in the water district for, these are the things we test for, and these are the things we're worried about. I don't actually know why we let ourselves be, mistaken from the word go, because obviously we treat for those. We don't serve that water to the public in that condition, and it's the natural state of the aquifer. I think it was just we just wanted to be transparent about everything. And I think the people that were involved in doing it at the time, cause when we were putting this together, it's a lot of different communities here represented that didn't play as well together as we all do now when this all got started. So there was some distrust in the room, I'll say. So everyone was trying to do what they could to build trust, and, Scotts Valley just wanted to be very transparent about, because mainly they're in our wells that we have, I think, the high iron and manganese. So, I don't think anyone thought it was a big deal, because everyone knew it was naturally occurring and we treated for it. But the idea of having a violation pop up every year is a little silly, so we just missed it. We didn't have to hop around.
Elegantly said.
Is there a consideration to augment that list of what you and,
There could be, we would look at, we'll look at that geo-tracker site that I was referring to. We'll actually talk to county staff and say, is there something that you are concerned about that we should be looking at? Again, traditionally, it's kind of reserved for if there's an actual plume that's been identified,
right?
is when you would start to get that focus. You're always sampling. We're not proposing the agencies, they're still doing the sampling they have to do in compliance. It's just, again, just a little different approach in how the sustainability agency looks at things, right? It's more at that, again, staying at.
But if a sampling agency was out of compliance for the different contaminants they're monitoring, then isn't they obligated to report back to this agency, then make actionable stuff, or does this agency then separately monitor all those contaminants? I'm a little confused on the process.
Which contaminants are you referring
The
to?
contaminants you show on the list.
The bad stuff, like a plume of some kind.
All of this is publicly available information. All of this is required monitoring.
Sure.
And we have access to every constituent that's.
So we're just basically reprinting.
Yeah.
From the agencies, yeah.
We're basically re-reporting what the
Right.
what the individual districts are already reporting back to the state.
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, again, so for example, total dissolved solids, as I said, that's a basin issue. So every one of them could be, well, you know, I'm meeting my maximum potential level to serve it as water, it's fine. But I might be looking at it going, do you see that the average concentrations of total dissolved solids are going from 600 to 625 to 650?
Trending
It's
up.
our job to pay attention to the big picture, right? So that's to serve safe water while not necessarily paying attention to what's happening in the pool, right?
So, thank you.
I saw a question right there.
Yeah, I'm just curious, what happens when an undesirable event occurs?
So we would have to define what would we do about it? What's a project that we could implement, for example? That would take care of that, or what's
So
the
if one
action?
well, if one well triggers an event, then you would have to come up with a project, some sort of.
Yeah, and that's in part why I'm suggesting that we don't use a single well as that point, right? These things happen all the time in an individual well. It doesn't mean the basin. And again, that's our job, is to pay attention to the health of the basin.
And I think also if it happened at an individual well, like let's say, the example you used, sometimes San Lorenzo will have to, if they're not getting the surface water they need, they might have to pump a well in the shallow Santa Margarita Formation harder during a certain period of time, and it might get drawn down. That drawdown is not gonna be permanent if they go back to their normal, usage of surface water versus well water.
Right, in particular, when it comes to groundwater levels, that's much, I would say easier, but much more manageable, right?
Right.
Because you can make operational decisions. Oh, I'm nearing an MT over here, and so I need to shift over to some of my other resources.
Right.
That's straightforward. When you have contaminant,
Right.
that's a little different, right? Their initial action is going to be to treat. Our job would be to pay attention, does that appear to be something that maybe their pumping is actually causing the movement of a contaminant? Let's say we've identified that there's a dry cleaner, there's PCE, it's been mapped out, and I'm looking at it showing up in a well downstream here. The action is, it's not really just gonna be treat that well, it's gonna be they're gonna need to back off the use of that well. So one of the examples that uses the mid-county basin where they have seawater intrusion, and they've taken a lot of action to reduce pumping, to shift pumping, because they wanna not let that happen. So that's a pretty straightforward example, and we've seen success from that. So I think that's what it is. You need to do this in real time. You have to have a methodology here that's in place, right? That's your common practice, so that you're not letting something slip through the crack. The good news is groundwater doesn't move all that fast. So having an annual process to sit down and review holistically this information, I think is a pretty good, frequency to doing it.
Okay. Yes, Tim.
Ruth Stiles had her hand up earlier. I see it went down, but I'm gonna give her the opportunity to talk in case. Ruth, Director Stiles, can you hear us? I think you have to unmute yourself on your end before we can hear you. So if you go to the bottom left of your screen, you should see a microphone there. Gonna give you a minute here, and if your microphone's not, there we go. Director Stiles, if you can hear us, you need to unmute yourself on your end. I can't do it for you. Let's try this instead. I can't. There's a chat function in there. If you go by your name, you can send your question or comment via chat or via email. I'll keep an eye on that, but unfortunately, I cannot unmute you. That's something you need to do yourself. I'm not seeing any other hands go up online.
Okay. All right, that's great, Rob. Thank you. That was really efficiently done.
And then there was a board, there's an opportunity for board input on this. This is a general business item, so the recommendation in the packet was to receive an update. For the board was to receive the update and provide direction, so there's an opportunity if anybody wants to provide directions via a motion, you're welcome to do so. And then, two reminders, in fact, an opportunity for public comment on this. And then I want to back up to the prior item because I think we might have skipped public comment related to the well owner vacancy. But let's deal with this one first.
Okay.
And see if there's a board action and or public comment beyond questions.
I think we have public comment on this, didn't we?
I think we took questions, but I don't know that we invited comment.
Oh,
Director Larkin.
got me on that.
I just wanted to make one comment. Rob, this is really fascinating. Thank you so much for applying your experience in other settings to efficiencies and kind of bringing things into standard practice. What I anticipate or understand during the arc of the series of conversations we'll be having to make this update, a lot of the opportunity is along the lines of efficiency. And what do we not do that, or what do we change how we do so that we're not running into trouble unnecessarily, that is not truly indicative of issues with the system. And previously, we talked a little bit about what kind of, are all of these different monitoring locations warranted? Maybe there's correlations between them that would allow us to remove some and not others. And I guess for my part, maybe I'm a curious person. Curiosity killed the cat, don't want it to kill the water agency. I like information. I like having comprehensive reporting that is allows me to understand the stuff that's going on in the system. And as we remove information from the reports and from our presentations, there's just less insight there. I recognize that some of the information is fraught. It might trigger problems that unnecessarily kind of false positives, so to speak. And then other information is expensive. Monitoring may be expensive. But it would be nice to just have an understanding of the costs and benefits of the things that we're proposing to remove. And if something is cheap and low risk, I guess I'm inclined to keep it in there because it helps just flesh out the story of what we're looking at. So I'll just kind of make that request and express that preference.
Great. Duly noted, and I do want to mention as well, with the annual report, we do have an ad hoc committee to ensure, we haven't started the report yet, but it is to address just that in terms of information that you find to be useful, because there are opportunities to really streamline a lot of our reporting to the state, but we want to also make sure that we end up with something that's still meaningful to you.
Terrific.
So
I'm certainly open to
same
that.
approach on this effort.
Right. I'm and for that, I don't know if it's appropriate, but I like the idea of the teacher's edition or something where we get some detail and then the state gets the minimum required that they need, for example.
Thanks, Brian. Does, so is what you maybe were looking for here is a direction through motion that would say, that sounds really good, Rob. Continue along that path. Sort of,
Sort of, I think it was more to gauge reaction if there was anything to the contrary and the board had strong feelings in redirecting, then it would help us that is clearly coming through in a motion. I think if the general head nodding is that this seems like it's on the right course, I don't think we need a specific action.
I think Brian expressed a very valid concern. Does anyone else have anything to add to that? Do we have any public people who would like to publicly add something more public?
Let's see, I'm just gonna check once more. I think we'll have to coordinate with Ruth Stiles later to get her comment. I'm not seeing any other hands go up. I'm not seeing any other.
Okay, all right. Then we'll move on to the 4.3, the Small Groundwater Sustainability Agency.
Can I back up for just a second before we go to 4.3? And correct me if I'm wrong, but I had a nagging feeling once we moved on from 4.1 that we may not have taken public comment on the well owner director vacancy and the ad hoc committee.
If you think that, I don't remember. So I'll say well owner alternate director vacancy and ad hoc committee as we voted and passed. Is there any public comment from either the virtual crowd or the in-room crowd? Yes.
I guess I'll just say that, as a potential applicant, it's very interesting that the alternate position does the not speaking thing. If I applied and was approved, then it's hard to do that, just because what if there's a question that I have or something? If it's a possibility, I know that would involve shifting bylaws, so that's probably way too big a project, but just throwing a little seed in there to shift that requirement, that might be great. I understand that other agencies don't necessarily do that. I understand that this agency maybe in the past had some more difficult trust issues where people weren't always working as well together as today. So perhaps it was more of a problem in the past than it might be today. That all said, whatever works. I may or may not, it's almost tempting to not apply and then go with, maybe there will be no other applicants, and then I could sit in the audience and ask questions and everything. But I can also see that leave the agency in a little bit of a bind if then someone did have to have they weren't available that day for the meeting. So that's kind of the summary of my thoughts there. Thank you.
And we went round and round on that years ago with the original the way the agreements were written and the founding documents. And there was really no way around having a third voice from the private well owners being like either a member of the public and the alternate representative. So it was a bitter pill to swallow for the people who had that job. And actually sometimes one of the well owners, private well owner representatives might have been absent, just so happened to be absent when the alternate then got activated and got to speak their mind. That may have happened accidentally, it may have happened.
Yeah, I'll add something too, that we would periodically meet as private well owners, including the alternate, so that if there were concerns, they could be voiced on behalf of the alternate at the meeting, or the questions asked. It's only mute during the meeting. It doesn't mean we can't compare notes and make sure we're on the same page, or seeking answers to issues as a group.
And we would hate to see a well-qualified and eager person not get the position because of, it is kind of a silly, technical. I'll look at our lawyer as I say this, it is a technicality that, couldn't be overcome. But like Eden says, there's flexibility within the group of you three that can give you a voice. Anyone online?
I'll double check, but I did not see any hands going up on that earlier. So,
Okay.
thank you for that.
And thank you for the housekeeping. 4.3, Small Groundwater Sustainability Agency Memorandum of Understanding for a Cost Sharing Agreement.
This is
Tim? Yeah.
Rob, principally Rob, with
Rob.
have some input from our legal counsel, Terry Rain as well, but I'm gonna hand it off to Rob to start.
So again, as a reminder, we've been discussing this for some time. The Small GSA Coalition has been working together successfully for over a couple of years now. Historically, it has just been funded by Sonoma Valley Water, and they are going to be ending that funding at the end of the calendar year. So those 10 or so of us agencies that have been working together very cooperatively really want to find a way to sort of pass the hat amongst each other so that we can continue to have somebody that facilitates our meetings, organizes us, and then ultimately provides advice to us on things that are important with respect to complying with SGMA. So this contract, far more challenging than groundwater sustainability planning, to try to come to good agreement when we have, the group has grown because of our success. I think when I put the packet out, there were 20, I think that there are still like 18 agencies that are interested, small GSAs. And each of them have legal counsels that review it, and we've gone through multiple iterations, and we thought we were there, and then we got a couple of comments from a couple of basins in South Park that are important to us. And they just said, these things are deal breakers, and we have more comments. So it's sort of a never ending loop. we will say the principle is this. The level of participation in this agreement is well within the general manager's authority to simply execute. Our opinion is, our intent is to continue ongoing as a group. And really, that's why we're coming to the board, is to recognize the fact that as long as things are going well, we intend to continue this as an ongoing effort. And therefore, we think should be, considered by the board for the cost sharing agreement. And the point of the cost sharing agreement is that we're all agreeing to share in costs equally, that they are subject to annual approval of the budget. And we have, at the end of any given year, the opportunity to off ramp at low risk, right? So we collect the funding that we need at the beginning. If you made a commitment at the beginning of the year, that funding is committed. You can't pull out, 60 days later and say, I want my money back. You made the commitment to that approved budget for that year. So that's your risk. And then again, every budget cycle. So that's the important part that I think the board needs to recognize is an agreement that we're looking for is, and again, why we're bringing it to you, is because the intent to have it being an ongoing activity. And you will still have this control by the annual budget approval and that commitment to working forward. So our legal counsel has been very active in this, and the group would like to have this executed before the end of the calendar year. We obviously don't meet again until February. So that's the crux of why we're here with this.
Just ask for anybody in the room that maybe doesn't know what this is, this group, this coalition.
Yes, so it's a group of agencies that didn't really start off this way intentionally, but it ended up being groundwater sustainability agencies that extract less than 10,000 acre feet per year. And so again, we've talked about this. Even with the status of our basin and the limited groundwater, we still have all of the compliance points under SGMA that the huge
Giant districts have.
And so the cost is disproportionate to our agencies. So that group has been working together to find ways to streamline work. So we share ideas. We go to the state and suggest to them, what we would like to see. And we've talked about most recently, we were very successful in getting a specifically identified pool of funds from Prop 1. Four, sorry, too many props. That's set aside. It's not a lot of money, but it's money that we could potentially benefit from for complying with SGMA. So we've had a lot of success. We'd like to continue that.
Okay. Any questions, discussion from the board? Monica?
Yeah, sorry if I missed this. Who represents us on that body or in that coalition?
So technically anybody can participate. It's an open committee. I've been attending, Sierra's been attending, and again, it's really just based on the experience that we've had.
Could a board member be going to the coalition meetings?
Yes.
Okay, it's fluid.
Or from the other agencies?
So
who do they
some of
have?
these GSAs are so small, they're small, Ojai comes to mind. It's a small water district, their general manager, because they don't have a lot of staff to participate. So tends to be general managers and such, and we have the situation where we have a contract, and so, some staff also participates.
I don't think any board members participate, I can't think of any off the top of my head.
Okay.
Anything else?
So the approximately $55,000 a year budget then funds a facilitator for the meetings?
The facilitator and what we call the advocate. So that's the person that is tracking things for us. Hey, there's some legislation that's coming up that might affect you. Or as we talked about back in May, we had an opportunity to go and meet a series of legislators, including some of our local ones that again was successful. So it's that type of activity. So it's a little bit more than just facilitating the meetings.
It's an administrator.
And Dubé is gonna continue or no longer doing it?
She would like to continue doing it.
Okay, but she's an employee of Sonoma.
She's retired.
Okay.
And so that was the arrangement. She worked for Sonoma. They basically provided her in kind. And so when she retired and then fully separated, now there's no mechanism for, in compensating her in any way.
Okay.
Yes, fine.
I'll just say that this strikes me as an extremely efficient way to get access to decision makers and speak with a collective voice and benefit the effort that we're undertaking here. So, yeah, I think it's a great idea.
And remember Sierra was working on this early on when, it was like just a couple of agencies.
Yeah, it's definitely grown and I really have seen it pay off, every time I see Paul Goslin now, he's the director of the Sigma program with the Department of Water Resources, he always mentions that he knows that we're here, he knows that we're struggling. It really helped with, I think the Prop 4 money is a really good sign of good faith from the state, and of course, the other side of this that we're continuing to message is, we've got to lower the compliance effort or have some form of off ramp for some of these requirements, because it doesn't make sense for anybody to be paying this kind of money if we're not getting great value out of it, even if the state's the one who's giving us the money, so.
Okay, anybody else on the board? Greg? Oh,
Can we be reasonably confident that our shared interests are gonna overcome the legal pencil lead wearing? I mean, it seems like a relatively trivial agreement to get into place. It seems like the shared interests are pretty dramatic. I'm surprised that it's this hard. Or is it just that because there's 18 lawyers in the room and everybody has to find their own bush, so to speak?
I think the coalition members, I think the lawyers aren't in the room with the coalition members, so we haven't had that one-on-one conversation. I'm talking to Rob all the time, but there's 16 or 17 other attorneys that are not in the room at the same time. I'm not talking to them. They see my red line comments. I think we're in the 5th round of an agreement. And,
How much is it costing us to get this agreement?
No, we need an attorney coalition.
it's, so I've been an attorney since 1984 in California, and I've never seen anything like this. You worry about who has contracting authority. We have we're sending staff out, but who can sign the contract? Well, we got to designate somebody who has authority, which would be David, who would have legal authority. So you got to think about contracting authority. You got to think about those type of issues, and we're trying to all be on the same page. And I think the only way we're going to move forward is a Teams meeting with the attorneys and the coalition members.
Right. Yeah, there's a reasonable expectation we all want this. And we do think that's maybe the missing piece is we're meeting as a group, the staff is meeting and agreeing to these things, and then we're sending it out and getting a different.
And getting red
response
lines
from-
back.
Yeah, the lawyers need to hear it from your mouth.
Who's making the most problems? Montecito?
I might be the one with the most problems. I have the most questions. I keep bugging. So I don't know.
Stop that.
You can say who's causing the most problems. I don't know.
It's a Southern California basin. I would leave it at that. So it's an adjudicated basin, no less. So, yeah, oh, delightful.
Okay, board satisfied for now, and how about anyone from the public?
No hands online.
Okay, so I think we need a motion, put this thing to bed.
I'll move the recommended motion.
That was Angfer, motion, who seconds?
I'll second.
Okay, Monica Martinez, second. Roll call.
Director Cassidy.
Aye.
Chief.
Aye.
Angford.
Aye.
Director Koenig, if you're still here, although I don't.
Aye.
Oh, great, thank you. Largate.
Aye.
Lang.
Aye.
Perry.
Aye.
Pollock.
Aye.
Leishman.
Aye.
Wimp.
Aye.
And Martinez.
Aye.
Okay, great, good job. Okay, staff reports. Financial report, through July 1st, are there any questions or any report, nothing additional? What,
I don't think there's anything additional. Treasurer John Dillon is here, so I think if there are questions, it's included in the packet that he's
John's here?
One thing I know, there was an invoice missing, so one of the categories is
there hasn't been any spending, and that's an invoice that would have been received when I was preparing the reports, so. That's the only thing to note on the reports that I have.
Okay, any questions from the board on the, nothing? Any questions from the public if you're looking at the financial report?
I'm not seeing any hands online.
Okay. And then any Santa Margarita Basin implementation, it's pretty much. Any directors' reports? No? Anyone? No. Okay. Any future items any board member would like to see on the agenda? Okay. Informational items are there. There's 24th Annual Environmental Town Hall, the Felton Community Center. I think any board member is invited to go sort of as a stand by the table person.
Exactly, the agency will have a table there again this year, and so there's, typically good turnout at this event, and we've had both board members and private well owner representatives and staff participate in the past, and so we'll be there again on November 8th.
Okay. Events calendar is good, so that takes us to the last item. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Moved. All right. All those in favor? Aye. Thank you, everybody.